What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're jumping in with some Destiny 2 news, and as always on a Thursday we have This Week at Bungie. Actually this one's a pretty interesting one. Bungie talk about changes that they're going to be making to vanity items and accessories moving forward in Year 4, so that's going to include a new transmogrification feature, new seasonal aspirational pursuits to pick up armor. Bungie say that they're going to be improving rewards for aspirational activities like raids, trials, and dungeons. They even give us a tease to Destiny 2's next raid, and a fairly significant nerf to some elements of the Eververse Store as well. And then they touch on core changes to playlists, currencies, and a few other things. So those are the kind of future updates for the game. But also we're going to talk about the upcoming Iron Banner, Bungie bounties, and more in this video. So guys, as always, if you do enjoy this one, a rating below really helps me out. But now, let's get into it. The first thing I want to touch on today, and something that's highlighted in the TWAB as well, is that both me and my friend Jarv are going to be part of the Bungie bounty on Monday the 11th of May. So that is part of the Bungie and direct relief effort right now to support healthcare workers all around the world during these pretty scary times. So we're going to be trying to get as many donations as possible, and if you can do that, of course it's absolutely amazing. You do get the Guardian's Heart emblem if you donate $20 or more, but also, as always with the Bungie bounty, me and my buddy Jarv will be jumping into Classic Mix on Xbox, and we are based in the UK, and if you beat us, or you're on the winning team with us, then you're going to win the Bungie Bounty emblem. So that'll be at 10 AM PST, which is 6 PM in the UK, once again on Monday 11th, in Classic Mix on Xbox. Be sure to stay tuned here on Monday if that's one you can hang out for, and I really do appreciate Bungie giving us the opportunity to do this. But now getting to the news stuff initially, before we talk about This Week at Bungie. Today Microsoft did reveal a bunch of gameplay for Xbox Series X, but additionally they announced backwards compatibility for a bunch of different games. And Bungie clarified Destiny 2 will be on next-gen platforms, more details to come. So obviously this is going to be pretty interesting, with those consoles having more power and all that stuff. Immediately the question becomes, are we going to get 60 FPS for D2 on console? And in terms of technology that seems entirely possible, but then there is the other question of blending the player pools, right? Presumably Bungie would want to avoid having players jumping in at 30 FPS versus other players running the game at 60 FPS. But equally, we also know that Xbox is one of the smaller platforms for Destiny, so to split the player base up and all of that kind of stuff could also be problematic. However, nonetheless, as Bungie have said, more details will come, and for the moment we just don't know what those technical improvements could really look like. But for console players, obviously, with the new generation of consoles coming out, initially it is a big positive that D2 will be on next-gen platforms in general. But when we get more details about it, I'll be sure to keep you posted. Moving to the TWAB, Luke Smith actually jumps in and talks about some changes that Bungie will be bringing to Destiny 2 in the future. So all of these changes and more are planned for Destiny 2 Year 4. And so straight into it, they say for vanity and accessories, including ships, ghosts, and sparrows, they're going to be adding a transmogrification feature to Destiny 2, and this will allow players to turn their armor into universal ornaments. They plan to allow players to do this with in-game effort or silver, so there will actually be an option there, but they point out that the feature is in early development and is expected sometime during Year 4. And so that's a pretty interesting idea. You could take any piece of armor in the game essentially, and turn it into an ornament that you could equip on a different piece of gear with better stats or whatever. Definitely a cool idea, and I'm sure there'll be more to that when it actually gets into the game. But also, they say that each season we will deliver an aspirational pursuit for armor, and we haven't done this consistently in Destiny 2. So this armor will come from activities, not the Season Pass or Eververse. And so as an example, we removed the Eververse armor from Season 11 and itemized it into an aspirational activity because this is the right thing to do for the game. Definitely a positive there, Bungie actually shifting rewards that they've designed for a particular part of the game, that being the Eververse Store, and moving it specifically into a gameplay activity reward. These are certainly positive signs. But on top of this, moving forward, Luke Smith says we are improving the rewards for aspirational activities, so raids, trials, and dungeons. Aspirational activities will reward players with power, items, and vanity, and when we build an aspirational activity, it will have at least one accessory to pursue. The team is working on adept weapons for Trials of Osiris, and of course they've spoken about that recently, but Trials will get new armor, so that's not going to be a reprised piece of armor, or set of armor, should I say, but a brand new set, accessories, and weapons in Season 13, and specifically they say that Trials will get new armor every year. And so actually the new Trials armor is going to drop presumably in the fall season. that'll be later on this year. But finally, Destiny's next raid will have brand new armor as well as weapons and exotic accessories to pursue, but they're not going to give us any specific spoilers on that. So essentially, a big part of this is going to be that we shouldn't expect to see reskins of any gear inside of these activities, but also they're looking to improve the appeal of these pieces of gear. In addition though, beginning in Season 12, we will no longer be selling ships, ghost shells, sparrows, or armor ornaments in Eververse that are visually based on themes from aspirational activities. They say they're not planning on changing existing items, as that is time we could be spending on itemizing the future. But essentially what they're talking about is having, enemy-themed pieces of gear and items that carry the visuals, say, of the Scarlet Keep and the Scarlet Hive from Shadowkeep, which we've seen various different ships and sparrows and things like that over the past few months. So those things aren't going to be dropping in Eververse, and as Bungie say, we're going to be seeing more of those cosmetics drop in activities. Presumably, that's going to mean that there is a shift back to having more of that stuff acquired via gameplay. So, of course, these are only words on paper at the moment, but they definitely sound like positive changes when we get them. Once again, though, as I've said, these changes aren't all going to roll out immediately at the start of Year 4, but will actually be distributed over a period of time. On top of this though, there will be core playlist reward changes for Strikes, Gambit, and the Crucible. So he says they're adding a new set of armor for core playlists. This armor shares a new set of geometry with decals and shaders specific to the activity. We will create new sets like this each year. So for year 4, 5, 6, etc. And this set will arrive alongside the next expansion. That also sounds like a definite positive, kind of ritual items I suppose for specific activities, but ones that stick around for a longer period of time. But also in Season 12, he says that they're adding a new pursuit weapon each season, and this weapon can be earned by playing your preferred core playlist, and will have one activity-specific legendary skin that can be unlocked in each playlist. So I guess really where they moved away from pinnacle weapons and then eventually ritual weapons to where we just had one of them last season, or this season, which of course is the Iron Banner bow. There will instead just be one generic ritual weapon every season, which at the very least is much better than having no ritual weapons. They add as well that they will no longer be selling legendary weapon ornaments in Eververse. So give us your thoughts about that, but also there will be currency changes, and that includes Bright Dust, which will be made a little bit easier to earn. So we'll be moving away from character-specific ways to earn Bright Dust and more toward account-specific paths, and this change is geared towards giving one character players significantly more Bright Dust than they can earn today. And then in addition, they will update the Bright Engram to be more relevant than it is at the moment. So it'll be updated to include various Year 3 Eververse items previously sold for silver and Bright Dust, and going forward, the Bright Engram will update each season to include Eververse items from 3+ seasons prior. And so give us your thoughts about all of those changes, guys. They definitely sound pretty positive. And when you put them alongside the changes that we have heard about already, yeah, I think largely this sounds pretty good. But of course, we'll see how the content actually changes and evolves. Especially in Season 12, that's the beginning of a new year, right? So once again, give us your thoughts about it down below. There are some other relevant bits of feedback to talk about regarding Eververse, and we'll touch on those in a moment, but it is worth pointing out that next week, starting on Tuesday, Saladin will return to the tower hosting the final Iron Banner of this season. So they point out that this does serve as the last call for a few rewards, and that includes the Iron Remembrance armor sets, the Cast Iron Emblem, and the Iron Precious shader. But it's also going to include the last chance to earn the Point of the Stag Pursuit bow, which is not going to be available during Season 11. So if there are any items or rewards you haven't picked up and you desperately want to get them, bear in mind that seasonal lockout that'll happen on some of the items. And Iron Banner will kick off next Tuesday. That'll be the 12th of May, running up until the following weekly reset. Now though, to some bits of further feedback and conversation. Initially, it's worth highlighting, Cosmo said that Bungie are always looking to improve the way that the story of the game unfolds from season to season, and you can read more about that in last week's TWAB. But in terms of this season, he does say that it isn't over yet, and we'll have more story content for you next season as well. And that's that indication that we're going to get, of course, more story content in itself. We actually have to wrap up the main story thread for the season, and we know of some sideline threads that are going to be pretty cool, and also have some neat rewards. But as a continuation about the conversation of the Eververse Store, Talking Wires on Reddit did point out that the past couple of seasons, character development and updates on dangling plot threads have been happening via the Eververse Store. And so initially, during the Dawning, we did see the ship that gave us an update on what was actually happening with Prince Aldrin and his life as a Guardian just outside, or somewhere outside of the last city, witnessing the Dawning event actually taking place. And that was a really cool, exciting bit of lore, right? But it was linked to an Eververse item. And they go on to point out that last week we learned that Hawthorne confronted Zavala about competing in Guardian games. That was also some lore on a ship. And then this week, we get additional lore via another Eververse item that Hawthorne is actually playing for Team Titan and clearing lost sectors. Of course, they're just minor stories inside of lore threads, but the conversation is about the fact that these lore threads are being found in the Eververse Store and not always on items that we actually acquire in the game. And so DMG said, folks have eyes on this internally, and we'll give an update when we can. But it looks like the team is moving to avoid doing this in the future. It may not apply immediately in Season 11, but seasons after that are when we're targeting not seeing lore on Eververse items. And so yeah, just an interesting sideline that Bungie are essentially looking to remove lore from items in the Eververse Store. I don't think players necessarily had a problem with seeing some lore on Eververse items, but especially when particularly big story threads or entire series of bits of story are kind of appearing over multiple items. I can totally appreciate how that stuff definitely deserves to sit alongside gameplay content or items that you acquire in the game, and that includes lore cards that go into collections, and for players who want to collect items in the game, right? However, players went on to say, you are going to add that lore elsewhere, right? It's critical to understand here that players are not asking for less lore, but we're currently uncomfortable with where it's located, and DMG said, there isn't a single person on the team that would ever think players wanted less lore, and essentially he understands that the delivery method of said lore is what the feedback is actually about. And so give us your thoughts about that one. It's definitely an interesting conversation, and again, as you guys know from me, I would love to see more of those cosmetic items, especially enemy-themed loot, which is appearing more and more often inside of the Eververse Store, and we're not getting that inside of raids necessarily, or always inside of dungeons and things like that, which isn't an outright complaint. I appreciate we saw new Hive-themed weapons for the Altars of Sorrow that you could also get in the dungeon, and the dungeon was kind of used as a buffed loot pool for items from the Moon loot table, but again, there is a pattern of a cosmetic difference, especially when we're talking about pinnacle endgame gear, but lore being contained on those items is definitely an interesting angle and one I actually hadn't thought about, so it's good that Bungie are talking about changes there. It's also interesting that there have been an increasing number of articles and discussions, be it on YouTube or on Reddit, Forbes or otherwise. A lot of people are talking about anti-S wards right now, and just how obnoxious they can actually be. It's interesting to see players kind of openly say that an item needs to be nerfed, and it's one that's cropping up more and more often, and of course, I'm sure usage of the exotic is increasing as well. So in the early-ish stages of that conversation, I'd definitely be curious to get thoughts from you guys below. For today though, that is everything we have to talk about in the video, guys. So, as always, I hope you've enjoyed this one, and if you have, a rating below really helps me out. Also, feel free to get subscribed so I can keep you up to date with the world of D2. Once again, a quick reminder, we're going to be on that Bungie bounty, Xbox, Classic Mix, and we are playing from the UK at 6 PM UK, which is 10 AM PST, on Monday the 11th of May. And you'll know when it's live because we'll be live right here on the YouTube channel. Otherwise, thank you guys for tuning in. Give us your thoughts on what we've spoken about below. But otherwise, I hope you have an awesome day.